everybody, welcome back to the Robinson Curriculum course. And in this video, we're going to talk all about reading. One of my favorite things to talk about is books. So we're going to talk about the books, what the reading time looks like, reading comprehension, where certain books that people usually have trouble with, where you can maybe move them to make everything go a little bit more smoother. So let's talk about that. And also a little bit on bookbinding and where to find books if you want to buy them, all that good stuff. So let's just jump right in. Okay, so before I get started really diving into this topic, I do want to make a note. I feel like a lot of people considering the Robinson curriculum maybe don't do it because they feel like these are the only books that they would be allowed to read, that they can't read any other books. And really nothing could be further from the truth. This is just kind of your curriculum. If you were to be doing any other curriculum, you would never think that you can only read that curriculum and you can't ever read any other books. Same thing here. This is the Robinson curriculum. This is the curriculum program, your history, your science, your government, your civics, all of that is in the book list. So yes, read this during your school time, but that doesn't mean that you can't read other books. We read lots of other books. We have read aloud times, and my kids and my children choose other books to read in the afternoon, but it's just that we read it in the afternoon when all the schoolwork is completed. This is part of their schoolwork. So don't see it as I can only read these books and not any other books. You can read any other books in addition to these books. And even if you're not comfortable with some of these titles, which usually every parent has maybe a couple books that they don't want to read, they want to skip, they want to replace with something else, that's okay. Just know that this is a really well-rounded selection of books that's going to cover all the major subjects, such as poetry and novels and short stories and fiction and nonfiction. It's all in this book list. But again, these aren't the only books that you can ever read. You can still read other books at other times, or if there's a book you really want to exchange, replace, that's fine. Okay, so let's talk about acquiring the books. Before you can get started, before your children can start reading them, how do you get the books? You can print all of them from your RC CDs or online. All the books are there. So you never have to worry about what if I can't find this book. They're all there. You can print all of them out. You can print them like this in booklet form. And I've gone over this before. The easiest way I find is just the two prongs here. Use some bookbinding tape. I laminate the cover here in the back, and that's it. You've got a great book to go. Or you can just print it full size, use a 3-ring hole puncher, put it in a binder, or use a comb binder. There's lots of different ways that you can do bookbinding. And I talked about that in the supplies portion of this course, if you want to go back to that. And I also have videos that I will link below where you can see exactly how I did this. Now, if you don't, for whatever reason, want to print your own books, you can certainly buy them. Lots of these titles are available as reprints on Amazon. This is The Tale of Jolly Robin, or you could just purchase them. I love purchasing, especially older books. This is just a few that I have from the Robinson book list. I have an app where I organize everything. I enter in the books that we have. I have a wish list on there of RC books that I don't have yet. So if I'm out and it is a sale, a book sale, I can scan the book or type it in and see if we already have it, if it's on the list and I don't have it. So an app like that is really helpful if you're going to try to acquire, to collect all the books on the list. So here, some of my favorite places to find them very inexpensively is Abe Books. Abe Books is my go-to #1 place to find books. I'll put a link below. I seem to always find the book that I want for less than $4 with free shipping. So unless it's a very, very rare book, but usually it's there and it's super cheap. Another place is Thrift Books. That's my second go-to place. And then Amazon or book sales, library sales. I'm not a big fan anymore of going to the library and checking out books just because it seems to be a huge liability for our family. However, I love the library book sales and their library bookstores. Now, before I move on with this video, I do want to make a case for some of these books that I feel like parents are kind of quick to want to overlook and want to replace that I think have really tremendous value. So I just want to make a case for them right now in this video before we move on. I think for parents, it's easy for them to see the value in reading maybe a book like Our Hero, General U.S. Grant, or The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, or The Child's History of the Life of George Washington, or classics like Robinson Crusoe, or great poetry and stories from Rudy Kipling, Oliver Twist, maybe even some historical fiction by G.A. Henty. But I've noticed that when it comes to the series books, like the Tom Swift, or some of the Arthur Scott Bailey books, or the Five Little Peppers series, just to name a few, that I noticed that some parents feel like, really, what is the value of reading so many books in one series? Like, okay, maybe I understand one book, one Five Little Peppers book, but why all of them in the series? Same thing with Tom Swift, why so many of those books? So here's my case as to why I don't think that you should skip them or replace them. There is tremendous value in reading these types of series books. And that is that children really learn so much through these stories. And if you Google, for example, Tom Swift and the people who have been inspired by Tom Swift books, you will find astronauts, inventors, even movie producers, just all kinds of people say that they were largely inspired by Tom Swift. I mean, these were very popular books back in the day. So there is a lot of science in these books, a lot of imagination, a lot of inspiration for young folks. For example, the Arthur Scott Bailey books, like The Tale of Solomon Owl and The Tale of Patty Muskrat. Why read more than just one? These have a lot of great nature study, but also there is a reason why they are early on in the book list, and that is because you're trying to get your children excited about reading. You want to get them hooked on stories. And look, these are no fancy Nancy type easy books. There's not a lot of illustrations. These are really to gear up their imagination. And I think it's pretty obvious if you give a child in the beginning books just like this one, just like the Josephine Pollard book, just the historical books, they're gonna not be so excited about reading time. They're gonna be dreading it. So I think it's just really genius how the list has kind of peppered in nonfiction book with a fiction to just kind of give the children a little break from something more serious and something more fun, something maybe a little bit more relatable, or where they can really learn from a character. And so you want a well-rounded literary diet. And if you just have maybe just the meat and the protein all the time, you're gonna get a little bit bored with that. You wanna also add in something sweet, some fruit, and this will get them excited about reading. They really kind of love the characters and they can learn a lot from them. And when a child has a book that they really love, they wanna read it over and over again, right? They want you to read it over and over to them. That's kind of like what it's like with the series. For it to be part of your childhood, you need to read it more than once. And being able to read all the books in the series, it's another way that the characters kind of really become part of your childhood. And that's why the selection is very important. You're paying for the selection. Somebody has already done all the work for you to select these very high quality books because it matters. Your children are very impressionable. What they read, they dwell on, they think about, and they act on. And I'll give you a perfect example of this and why I make a case for reading the series books. Recently, my daughter started reading the Five Little Peppers series, and I noticed that she was being a lot more helpful around the house. I mean, she already is such a terrific kid and she always is very helpful, but she was really going above and beyond, looking for ways that she could help and always asking me, is there anything that I can do, Mom? And so one day I asked her, where was this coming from? And she told me it was from Polly, a character in her Five Little Peppers book, who was very helpful to her parents. There's always some adversity or some challenges, and this character, Polly, had really stepped in and helped out, and she wanted to be like Polly, and so she was really helping out in the house. So that's why I make a case for them. Don't just skip them. Don't see them as little value and replace it with some other nonfiction or some other more serious book. Yes, add on other books that you want to, but I would say don't skip the Five Little Pepper series. Don't skip the Tom Swift books. This is all part of a well-balanced literary diet that is going to get your child excited about reading. You want to give them a little fruit. You want to give them a little sweet, not just the harder, meatier books. And they're going to get it all. They're going to get the poetry and the stories and the classics and the nonfiction. And as they grow older, the civic books. But while they're young, while they're forming this taste for books and reading, it's okay to give them books like these, whether it's getting inspired or learning about nature and animals or learning character qualities through great characters. They are learning, they are picking up more than you know. So that is just my thoughts on the books on the RC list. Obviously there are, a couple books like any parent that I'm not comfortable with, that I don't like the author, or I'm going to switch out. And that's fine. That's normal. But by and large, it's such a tiny minority. It's just a few titles. I'm going to stick with the list because I do see the value in it. So I just want to encourage you with that. All right, so now let's talk about specifics. The program says to do 2 hours a day of reading. Now, some parents adapt this a little bit. I've heard the rule of 10 minutes per year of a child's life. So let's say they're 8 years old, they'd read for 80 minutes. Or once they get to the max, which is 12 years old, they'd read for 120 minutes, which is the 2 hours. So by the age of 12, most kids are reading the 2 hours. However, it just depends where you're coming from. If you're coming from public school and this is just very different and foreign to them to just sit there and read for 2 hours, then it's okay. Start slow. Start with, getting a timer like this and maybe just doing 15 minutes and then every day increasing it 5 minutes, or take it slower. Every week increase just 10 minutes and keep going until they get to that 2 hour point. Some parents do 1 hour of a book on the RC list and then 1 hour of some other book that they've chosen. That's up to you how you want to do it. I personally like to do 2 hours of the book list, just how the program states. All right, let's talk about other frequently asked questions. At what age do you start them on the reading list? And what if you're starting with older children? Let's start with the younger one. Let's start with the easiest one. If you're starting out with older children, up until a certain point, and I've heard Dr. Robinson recommend this, it's best to just start them from the beginning. They'll go through those books really quickly. But again, it's all part of just getting them excited about reading and these classics and these books that are meant to do that. So I think up until the age of maybe 10, 11, 12, I would just say start from the beginning. They're going to go through them quickly. But what if you have somebody kind of older, middle school, high school age? Well, then you just have to kind of go through the list and trial and error. Give them a book. If it seems too hard for them, then scale back, go down a few spots. Ruth Beechick has this great tip in her 3 R's book where maybe you give them a book, give them about 100 words out of a page. And if they can't read so many words, then obviously it's too hard for them. I forget how many words exactly. Move down a few spots until you get it just right. Now, if you're just starting completely from the beginning with this program, how do you know when to start with the book list, right? Well, you obviously want to teach them how to read first, and you could use Alphaphonics that's included with RC Online. My favorite at the moment is the Abeka Handbook for Reading and the Alphabetti free books online. You might want to use 100 Easy Lessons. That's a very popular one where there's not this huge curriculum thing. You're just using a book and you're just teaching them how to read. You can use the phonics cards that come with the Robinson curriculum on the CDs and online. You can print them, kind of make your own little program, whatever you want to do. The goal is to get them to read. And again, RC is not very dogmatic about what you use, except that you use a phonics program, okay? The very first book on the list is the primer. I have I have 2 primers here. I don't know. I just do both of them. So you're going to go through the primer with them. Some families actually even use the McGuffies to teach a child how to read. And I didn't make a video on that. I'll link it below if you want to watch it. You can do that if you want to, but most parents, I think, use something else. And then this is just the first book. So the way we do it here in our house, and has worked really well, is the first few titles, and I'll mention up until when, I just have them read the books to me. And this serves and this has a lot of great benefits, such as I'm seeing if they really do know how to read, they're getting it, they're reading well, they have good reading comprehension. I'm able to ask them. The McGuffey readers are great for this because at the end of the lessons, they might have questions, so we could go over it or go over the vocabulary. It's just the best books to start out with on this book list. So we just read it together, or rather they read it to me. And how much? Just until I see that they're getting tired. They're just starting out reading. I'm not going to make them do 2 hours in a McGuffey's reader. We'll just do a few lessons until I can tell that they're just tired. I don't want them to dread it. I don't want them to dread reading time. So we'll do a few lessons and then call it a day. Pick it up the next day. So McGuffey's primer and the first reader. I don't know why I have 2 primers here, but so we keep it going into the first reader. And again, these lessons are great and they're short and they have vocabulary at the end. So then the first reader, again, they read it to me. They're great short little stories. We keep going until I see that they're just tired. We keep going until I feel that it's enough. And I just ask them questions after what they read to me. Oh, what was that story about? Just very easy, right? Very no pressure. Then we move on to the nursery rhyme book. I have a Christian Mother Goose nursery rhyme book. You might have a different title. And again, they read these stories to me. As you can see, it gets a little bit more from the McGuffey readers. So we read this. I have them read this to me. This is a fun one. Then the number 4 book is The Life of George Washington. Now, a lot of parents feel like, whoa, this got really serious really fast, and they have trouble with it. And maybe their 8, maybe their 7, 8-year-old is having a really hard time with this one. You're not alone. Many parents move this down the list. I will tell you that I move it down underneath book number 12. Number 12 is the Christopher Columbus and the Discovery of the New World by the same author. So I think being the same author and being kind of the same style, I think this is better as a number 12 or number 13 rather than a number 4. That's just my suggestion. I'm sure some parents do great with it being number 4, but that's where I move it to. Because after 4 on the list is the second reader. And to me, it just makes more sense going from the first reader to the second reader. And the reason why is the second reader, yes, it's a little bit more advanced, but again, shorter lessons. And it has questions at the end of each lesson. So it's great to read a lesson, have them read it to you. I still have them read to me at this point. And then I ask them the questions. Can you tell me how long the fox is? How high? So again, we're doing a little bit more reading comprehension. They're reading it to me. I'm still guiding them along. And, maybe they can read a little bit more, a little bit longer of this, but we're still doing it together and they're still reading it to me. I just find a lot of benefit in this to getting them off to a really great start. So again, we're still doing this together. Then the next book is The Tale of Jolly Robin. At this point now, they're reading on their own. I like the reprints. They're pretty big. They have a nice big font on them. That's why I favor them. But you can print them out and do that yourself. Make the font larger. So this is it. This is where they're on their own, The Tale of Jolly Robin. That's how we do it at our house. So rather than just tell you at what age a child should be able to read this on their own just fine, I can't really tell you that because each child is so very different and they'll start at different ages. What I can do is just kind of give you some advice to make sure they're at a strong point when they get here, and that's maybe read with them the first few books, have them read them to you and test their reading comprehension. Then it should go well once they get to here. Now, once they get to this level, how can you test their reading comprehension? My favorite way is to just ask them, what did you read today? What was it about? And normally I don't even do that. They just are eager to tell me. They tell me in the morning at breakfast, they talk about it. While we're washing dishes or doing laundry, they want to talk to me about their book. And so that's just the best way I find to deal with reading comprehension. Just talk about it. Now, a message that I would really like to get across to moms out there is that there is an instructional time and then there's a time where you are just mom and you are helping your child out. And those can get a little bit blurry when you're homeschooling at home. But remember, there is a time where you teach your child how to read. where you're going through phonics, where you're going through vocabulary, when you're teaching them, maybe going through the spelling list. And then there are times when they're just reading and they just need your help, Mom. And so that's okay. Have them when they're starting out sitting close to you. And if there's a word that they can't read, and if there's a word that they can't read and they say, Mom, I can't read this word, don't get frustrated. Don't say, well, you know how to read that word, or sound it out, or, just tell them what it means. Just make the reading time enjoyable and just read the word to them. Just tell them what word it is. Explain to them what the word means if they don't understand. And so they can just keep it moving, keep going, keep reading. You want this to be an enjoyable time for them. So again, there's an instructional time in your day, and then there's a time when you're just mom and you're just helping them. It just makes such a big difference when you approach it that way. Another great tip that I've heard recently, if they're a little bit older and they're reading independently, by themselves, and they get to a word that they don't know what it means, then maybe they can just keep a list, have a piece of paper and a pen, and they can write down all the words that they did not understand while they were reading. And then when the reading time is over, they can come to you and say, hey, Mom, I didn't understand these words. And then you can go over them. You can explain what those words mean. You could help them look it up in the dictionary. So that's just another way that you can help them. One last thing that I want to mention before we end this video is that we're obviously trying to encourage children to love reading and to read a lot during the day, right? And you want to make sure that there's nothing on your bookshelves that you wouldn't want your child reading. You want to encourage them to just read for leisure, read a lot. So you want to be careful, obviously, what's on your bookshelves. And I know books just have a tendency to creep in, maybe as gifts from other people, or we go to some places where they have free books out and kids can pick free books. And then, every so often you really should just go through your bookshelves and purge out anything that you don't want them reading, that you feel uneasy about, because you want them to just be able to go to your bookshelf and grab any kind of book and read it. So be careful, be cautious with that. Also, I want to talk about how some parents feel that the kids are just not really excited about the books. They don't really like reading them or reading in general. And one thing that you might want to keep in mind is competition and distractions. This is one reason why the Robinson curriculum says no electronics until the age of 16. Because if you're going to put a book like Our Hero, General U.S. Grant, up against a tablet or an iPad, which is a child going to choose? Or if you say you can read a book for fun or you can watch a show on Netflix, which one is the child going to pick? So part of the reason of removing all those electronic distractions is to make the books more appetizing. The less competition a classic book has, the more appealing it's going to be to young minds. So if you are going to allow electronics in your home, be very mindful of this, be very careful. Never put a book against an electronic device. Never have them competing. Have just guidelines for those electronic devices. For example, like I mentioned, the Extra Math for the math facts. It's just for a brief period of time. Just make sure that you have some limitations, some boundaries, obviously being careful what it is that they're seeing. And there's lots of great programs like K9 for any kind of electronic devices, filters. Obviously, all of that is so very important. But just talking about why a child might just be bored and not wanting to read, look into that. Is there a lot of distraction? Is there a lot of competition with more electronic devices? And that's also why I think if you are going to use an e-reader, make sure it's just for books. I mean, you as a parent, you probably know this. For me, I can't do a Bible app, a Bible reading plan app on my phone because there's just too many distractions on my phone. I prefer just reading the actual Bible and putting my phone away. And also, I mentioned this before, it just does something when you have a book in your hand and the smell and the feel and you know how far into it you are, versus an e-reader, you don't really have that. So just all things to kind of keep in mind. And if you have any questions on this, please leave them in the comments below. In the next video, we're going to talk about what about all the other subjects and some frequently asked questions. So I'll see you in the next one.